Welcome to the Sunmall Podcast, where we interview the stars of e-commerce. Hi, today we have Ibrahim Masood of Pilaway, where he leads marketing there. Ibrahim, great to have you on the pod. My first question is, how did you get into e-commerce growth? You came from an engineering background, so how did you make that transition?
Yeah, Ron, firstly, thank you so much for having me on the pod. It's an honor. So, coming to your question, so engineering was never really something that I thought about. Like, I don't think I would have ever joined engineering if it wasn't for my family. After doing 12th, I was like really lost, didn't really know what to do. Most of like, I think like that's how most of the things in Indian households work. Like you either like the family either want you to become a doctor or engineer, or at least in the most households. So in my case, it was obviously for guys, it was more like engineering. For girls, it was more like medical. So for me, yeah, they basically asked me to do engineering, and then when I mentioned, okay, let me go take up CS, they were more like, okay, I think like you should probably take like mechanical because it looks like it's going to be evergreen, but that wasn't really the case. So I ended up taking mechanical, wasn't really interested. Flunked a lot of times in a lot of subjects, barely completed it. But even during engineering, so I was actually raised by a single parent, so I had to make sure that I had other sources of having some income. So during my classes, like like we had to use this one calculator called as FX991ES Plus. So I knew every first year engineering students, when they would have to join, they would have to get this calculator. So and I knew a place where I would basically get these calculators like for pretty cheap. So I used to try selling these to other students, make some money, market these products, have some WhatsApp groups built back then. So it is pretty nice. I had some like pretty nice income, but marketing was always something that got my curiosity. Like I always loved selling products. So that is one. And two, I remember like in my final year engineering, like a friend of mine gifted me a book by Phil Knight. It's on basically Nike. So I read that and it was really fascinating. It got my curiosity, and then I I remember in 2019 I came across an ad on Facebook. It was mostly on e-commerce, and I joined the webinar. It got my curiosity even deeper, and I dig deeper into like more webinars, more courses, and I was like, okay, e-commerce is something that I really want to do. And anyway, I didn't have a job, after engineering. That's what I think like most engineering students in India do. Like they do engineering and then they ask themselves like what do I really want to do now in life. That's how it works. So basically in engineering I learned everything except engineering, and then I transitioned into e-commerce through uh, I, yeah, through different ways. I came across an ad and all of that. So yeah, that's just my story in a nutshell.
That's awesome. So it's really kind of cool that you got in. You were always kind of had that hustler mindset, selling the calculators. Just kind of a quick hack there, and then the Phil Knight in the book. I think one of them was Shoe Dogs, which I think is like a really inspirational book. Have you seen the new movie? I think it's called like Air or
Yeah, I actually have that on the list. So yeah, I'm gonna be watching it soon, but I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And then yeah, you kind of got there, and then naturally when you were looking for a job and a role, e-commerce, you were kind of had that business background and that inspiration from there, and you got into it. So maybe following up on that, maybe you can talk about the first couple of roles you worked at, Zoronto, Ecom Shack, kind of the background there, any kind of key learnings in that role.
Yeah, so after that 2018, so I was just focused on learning, and then in around 2020, I first started working in 2019, actually end of 2019. First started working in a infotech company called as Career Shuttle. I did my internship there for like 1 month, and then after that, I joined the company during COVID called as Quakey Clean. I spent about 4 months working there. Still, like it wasn't really full time, but was more like part time and consulting. So I worked there, and then I worked in an event company on the side because I had to make some money. I worked in a company called as Million Dreams that's based out in Bangalore as well. And then after that, I thought like I wanted to do something of my own. So I was kind of trying to build my media company and all of that. Just because I worked in like three companies, I thought now I could build like $1 million business. But that didn't really go as planned, because probably God had other plans. Like after 4 months of trying to build it, a few things happened. Like I was trying to connect one brand, because like there was this director of a brand called as One Stop who reached out to me. It's like a pretty huge brand. Like they have like 20,000 products, and based out in Mumbai they have like 8 offline retail stores. So they wanted to transition to e-commerce during the COVID. So he reached out to me, wanted help with the marketing strategy and all of that, implementing acquisition, retention, and everything. So in the beginning I thought like I could do it, but then I realized, okay, this is like a big deal. They have like 20,000 products. I can't really fake it. Like, I have I have to get like a proper team to do it. I can't do it all alone. I can't tell him like I can. So I tried finding people to do this. I found like a acquisition, a media buying company, and then a retention marketing agency that is like who do email, SMS, all of that. So they did end up working with the acquisition agency that I connected them with, and I obviously got some. I kept getting some incentives, like about 15% of the money the media company made, because I referred them the brand. And then they didn't really end up working with this retention marketing agency called Toronto. But the founder really liked the strategy that I put together and Notion for the one stop brand. And he was like, okay, you know what, like, Ibrahim, like I really like you. I think like you should come work with me. So that's how I ended up joining Toronto. And then that, I think like my time at Toronto was like probably like my most pivotal time. Like I learned so much there. Obviously I think like you might have some follow-up questions on what I learned at Toronto and all of that. But just to keep it short, I think like what one one of the most important things I learned at Toronto was like the power of Clayview and like what it can actually do, the ins and outs. So basically getting the customers phone numbers and emails, and segmenting these customers, and not just sending all the generic emails to all the customers. You need to segment your customers. The more segments you have, the better, because it feels like the brand is actually talking to me. So for example, if I'm a VIP customer, and if you're a brand talking to me just like any other customer, I'm not going to really feel anything special. Or if I'm mom, and if I'm a customer, and then I fall into the segment of mom, you got to speak to my issues and not like a general issue. So I think like that is so important. So that's the importance of segments. And then obviously there's email and there's text and all of that sort. So that's one thing at Toronto that I got to learn. And then I think like the second thing is I also was leading the project called as Ecom Shack. So basically what we did there was, it was like a marketplace for all things e-commerce. So anyone who wanted to learn more about e-commerce or was just starting off with e-commerce DTC, they could just go to that website called Ecom Shack. They could go and see all the curated podcast newsletters, the inspirations, the brands, everything. So it is pretty nice as well. So yeah, that's kind of what happened at Toronto.
That's awesome. So one thing that's really cool is like you kind of trying to do your own business. We're working with Toronto. They really liked you, and so you kind of organically went there. And
Exactly, yeah.
one thing you mentioned is the power of Clavio or Clavio. How do you Clavio? Whatever. Clavio. And one thing you mentioned was segmentation, right? What are some different ways you use to segment customers? Maybe some key gotchas, just any frameworks you have around segmentation.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to Klaviyo emails, obviously there are like two main differentiators. That is like, one, there is something called as email flows, and then there's something called as email campaigns. So email flows are basically everything that is completely automated, and then email campaigns are basically you send out emails based on what season or what holiday festival or whatever is happening basically. So for example, there's Mother's Day that just happened, so we had to like strategize and then come up with a campaign launch for Mother's Day. And then there's Father's Day coming soon, so we've got to prepare some emails and all of that for Father's Day. So that is basically us planning for the future, whereas like email flows is you just set it one time and just it just runs on automation. So when it comes to segmentation, I would say like some of the segments we have, very general segments is like obviously you have the VIP customers, you have one time customers, you have two time customers, you have people, I mean, you have people who uh, have had high value purchases but haven't really bought in a while, and then you have people who have checked out your product, viewed your product, and has come to your site like 10 times but hasn't bought your product. Like this, like you can go like dive really deep into it, but that's just some of the segments. And when it comes to like flows, email flows, that is like I told you, like there's something called as automation emails that you can keep sending. So there's obviously welcome flows, that is like someone comes to your website, they give you an email, whether it's through the purchase, they give it through the pop-up form. You can obviously have, I think like it's absolutely necessity to have a welcome flow, because yeah, it's kind of like an introduction to your brand. You welcome them. I think like the first email pretty much should be from the founder. I would highly recommend a text-based email, and not like a branded email. The very first email that feels like the founder has written it for me. Obviously you'll have to get their first name as a dynamic variable, but that can be the first email. And then the follow-up emails can be a little more about the brand, the story, and like how the product works. So little, not much of a selling, but more of an introduction to the brand. So yeah, so that's basically like a welcome email flow. And then obviously there are abandoned cart, there's checkout abandonment, there's browse abandonment, there's 100 different flows. But I think like these are some very important flows that you can set up, like abandoned cart, checkout, welcome, and then post purchase.
Totally makes sense. So you always want to have your automatic responses. I think the welcome you really mentioned, and post purchase, purchase, those type of automatic flows that anytime they do a key action on your website. But then also kind of these more campaigns where it's like a certain type of season, and there you want to segment on based on who they are, if they're VIPs or they're maybe they made a big purchase in the past, and
Yeah, and I think like one thing I would definitely add there is obviously you need to have flows such as, like I've not mentioned it, but review flows and all of these things, that you can potentially get from customers. But one thing I'll definitely add there is like I see so many brands not doing this, that is not having a review flow setup. Not sorry, not review, feedback flow setups. That is like, if you want to launch a product, instead of just assuming what, like if you have like a decent amount of customer base, instead of just assuming what your customer want, you could literally like just set up like a feedback flow, a feedback survey flow, and ask your customers what they want, how do they feel about the website, the experience, what can you potentially improve for them. So even in our case, like we've been like planning so many products to launch this year, but after asking our customers, our thoughts really change, like of what really to launch. So I think like that's super important as well, because if you give your customers what they want, they're going to buy it.
that totally makes sense. So it's not about, just in all the emails trying to sell them something. It's also about, getting their feedback, their inspirations, so that if someone says, hey, I want this type of product, if you give it to them, they're much more likely to buy, and, they're the actual customer. So really understanding.
Exactly. And I think like a good rule of thumb is three value emails and one promo email.
I got you. So when you mean value emails, do you mean, hey, getting their feedback, or do you mean like sending them some useful content, or what does a value email mean?
Yeah, so it definitely depends on brand to brand. So a survey email can also count as a value email, because you're not really trying to sell, you're just asking for their feedback. But when I really see value, I'm saying, like for example, in our case, Peel Away, we have like three different audience segments, that is like parents, party trainers, and caregivers. So when I segment customers based on caregivers, I send out email newsletters, you know basically mentioning tips on how they can like serve whoever they're serving better, how to basically reduce their stress, because they are a caregiver and they're always stressed. Usually they have multiple people to take care of. So basically tips and tricks around that, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. So really useful content specific to their segment. So I think you broke down the your customer base into three segments. So for that specific segment, sending them that content. Um,
Exactly.
one other channel people use to engage their customers is text messages. So how do you think about what to send over text and what to send over email?
Exactly. So I think like I would say the main difference when it comes to like in terms of law, the main difference when it comes to email and SMS is the privacy and then all the laws surrounding that. So when someone visits your website, if Klaviyo or any other similar tool can cookie that user, they can actually get their email even if the customer doesn't really provide it. That is, if they just browse the website and they just leave the website, a tool like Klaviyo can potentially cookie them and get their email anyway with the help of something like Google. Whereas in the case of SMS, you can't really do that. It's illegal to reach out to their number, and there's no way to get their number anyway. So that's one difference when it comes to email and SMS. It's okay even if a user leaves and you get their email and you reach out to them. And there's like separate flows for that called as browse abandonment flows. So that's one difference. And then two, I think like when it comes to email, obviously you can send a lot more emails compared to sending a lot of text, because I feel like SMS feels a super private channel. You do not want to get like random spams from brands. So I would say like you have to use that channel for something really important, or to announce something. So some a few examples would be like if you have a new product launch coming, so you let the people know that there's a product launch coming, because that's a good announcement, like you have new products launching. Whereas if you always have this promotion text that goes to their numbers, they're going to block you and then probably mark you as spam. Because honestly, like even I don't like receiving text messages from the brands. So every time I plan a text campaign, I always think about myself, like, would I have liked receiving this text from this brand? If I say no, then I'm gonna be like, okay, they don't deserve this. Uh, so yeah, I think like that's probably the main difference. If there's any emergency or if there's any announcement to make, you do it. But if a customer has consented to receive text, obviously otherwise you cannot reach out to them anyway. I think it would definitely make sense to set up a abundant cart flow for SMS and a post purchase, because people like receiving such notification. Like when they make a purchase, they get a text message saying, hey, like you've made this purchase, you can track it here, and then all of those things. And probably like if they're on subscription, you can send them text saying that, hey, like your subscription is going to be renewed after 3 days, and things like that. If you want to pause, if you want to skip this, you give them options that they don't really have to go to your website, log into your portal, and then do all of that. So if you can use SMS to make your customers' life better, make it more convenient, I think like it would like, yeah, that's how you should probably use SMS. And then not really to like always spam your customers with text and basically just get the sales out of those people.
uh Makes sense. Text is a much more private channel. So you really want to, we all get hundreds of emails, but we don't want to get hundreds of text messages every day. So really being careful about what are the few messages you can send. So either like some super special promo, or it's like right when they're making the purchase. Order tracking.
Yeah, and I think like one more important thing that I forgot to add there was like if you think about it, like SMS is actually something that's going to have like extremely high open rate, like probably like more than 90%, because people receive really important text message. It could be OTP, it could be a reminder about their EMIs, or things like that. So people always at least skim through their SMS, but that's not really the case with email. So you really want to make sure that you only reach out to them when it's absolutely important and necessary. Otherwise, like if there is an important announcement to make, they're not really going to hear it, because every time you just send out this spam text, so they're going to think that it's not important anyway.
Makes sense. Kind of like the boy who cried wolf, right? You really need to
Exactly.
be careful there. Um, So, are there any kind of other channels you guys use to engage your existing customers or your VIPs?
So we did use, like we did test out something called as post pilot. So you basically send out these postcards. So I use this to send it out to the lapsed VIP customers as well as lapsed customers. So I had like two different cards for these two different segments, and then I tried it. So I mean, I've been hearing that like some it works really good for some brand, but for us it just worked okay. Like we just broke even, I would say. Like, yeah, it was just okay. But for some brands, I think like it would totally make sense. Like if you sell a product that has like a high margin, high AOV, and a high value product, then I think it definitely makes sense, because you want to reach out to that customer and have multiple touch points. And I think like that gift card is like a postcard is like a really good way to make them feel special. Like they don't, like I don't think this is the time where you would receive like a lot of postcards. I think like that time is probably over now. It's all about SMS, emails, and then all of this. So when you receive something like that, I think like customer would feel special, especially if it's personalized. And a tool like post pilot lets you do that. It can get your customers first name and a few other things at scale. Like you don't have to like manually type it out. So yeah, I think it definitely depends on brand, but for us I think like it worked out just okay. So yeah.
Makes sense. Is the reason why you say depends on kind of high AOV and is it just because it's much more expensive to send a postcard, or why do you say that?
Yeah, I mean, like it's obviously going to be like an extra additional cost. Not really that of too much work, I would say. Like it's just an upfront work. Like you can just, it's basically Klaviyo but for the offline postcards. You can just set up those automation flows as well. It connects directly with Shopify as well. They have an app. So yeah, it's a little, I wouldn't say expensive, but if you're selling a product that is more like under $30 or something, I wouldn't probably recommend it. But again, depends. But for starters, I think like for most brands, sticking to just one or two channels in the beginning, like Meta and Google, I think is like sufficient enough, because they always have like small budget and don't really have a lot of budget to test new channels. So in that case, I would definitely recommend sticking to two channels. And Facebook has like 2 billion active users. So I think like that probably has all the audience that you're looking for.
Makes sense. So maybe we jump into that. Obviously, these channels, email and text are good. Once you have customers, or you're able to capture their emails and phone numbers. But how do you get people first to your site? So what have been kind of the best advertising channels for you?
Yeah, I think like it obviously for us so far. I think like the best channel has been influencer marketing, like doing influencer marketing coming from influencers. So we use, so firstly there are two things. So one we do is we send products to these creators, just to purely get content, and some of them just end up posting. So for this purpose, obviously we do use two things. We reach out to them via email and like Instagram, and then try sending them products, and then try getting that content. So these are like the creators and not influencers. So creators, when I say creators, people with like low followers, they're like a nano followers. Like they have less than 10K followers. They're happy to receive the product and just shoot content for you. So we do get some of the content this way. And then one more way is, there's a tool called as Mini Social. So they charge you about like $2,000 for one project, one campaign. So you can get like about 25 creators to basically shoot your make a video, make a UGC video. You can obviously have your own briefs. You can guide them on how the video needs to be produced, and then all of that. They make a nice reel story or whatever you want. And obviously some of them end up posting as well. You can give the affiliate code or whatsoever, and you know so it's a win-win situation. So that's one way. And the second way is obviously, we use a tool called as Saral. It's spelled as SARAL. So it's a comprehensive influencer marketing relationship tool, management tool. So from finding influencers to managing them to shipping the products to them to tracking, everything can be done within this tool. And I think like this tool is also a lot cheaper compared to like so many tools I've seen. In fact, it's probably the cheapest tool you could probably find for the value that you get out of the tool, because it does literally everything. So this is the tool I use to reach out to mass influences at once for product seeding. So when I say product seeding, again, we don't really pay these influences. We send them about 2 to 3 products, that is like about $100 worth of value of products, and then they're really like usually happy to post and share the content, and then let you use that content for your ads or any media buying process, marketing process. So that has been like working quite really well as well for us. So yeah, that's pretty much about it about influencers. So and if you want a discount into like Saral, you can come talk to me, because yeah. Yeah.
That's just a quick question. So, do these tools help you identify the? Because I think you mentioned these influencers are generally pretty small, following 10K. So, do these tools help you identify, which of these micro influencers will be good for you? Or
Yeah, I mean, like with the something like mini social, where you're paying them because they have this database. It's usually the nano creators, or micro creators, people with less than 10 or 20K followers. Whereas with a tool such as Saral, you can definitely find people with millions of followers as well, and then it basically gives you an insight into how, what is the engagement rate they have, how often do they post, how like what is their rate of followers that are like a diehard fans of these influencers. So like so much of data within this tool. So it's pretty nice, and they also have a feature that is like you can create an email campaign within that tool. You can also like finding these influencers, like for example, I go to Saral, and let's say I try to search for a keyword called as caregivers, because that's like one of our audience. So there's going to be like thousands of profiles that pop out. Then I use a feature called as like filter. I say, okay, I want at least 1% engagement rate. I want these people just to be in the US. I want these people to be so and so. This person has had to be posted in the last 30 days, 15 days, so I know they're pretty active. And then there's still going to be like thousands of them, because they scrape directly from Instagram. I mean, they have an API with Instagram. So and then you can basically add these people to a list, and then you can create a campaign, an email campaign, because your one of your filters is going to be telling Saral that, hey, only find people that you can find emails of. So they'll also find their emails automatically. So you can create a campaign, email campaign, have follow-up emails, because so many people are not going to respond to your first email. So have those follow-up emails, ideally four of them. First one is going to be like where you introduce yourself, share a little bit, and then follow up emails, you can share more about your brand, and all of those things. So it's been working pretty well for us. Obviously, like if you reach out to like someone with like millions of followers, it's highly likely they're going to ask for some money. They're not going to do it for free because that's how things are. So ideally we reach out to create influencers between 20 to 100,000 followers. So yeah, usually they're more susceptible and open to uh, receiving the product, and posting it and reviewing it for free.
makes sense. This almost kind of reminds me. It's kind of like the Clavio for getting these influencers. You gotta like segment the users, send out the automation.
Exactly. So in my case, yeah, in our case, like we have different lists. I have different lists. I have Instagram caregivers, YouTube caregivers. I have Instagram moms, YouTube moms. So there's like different segments and lists.
Makes sense. That's really cool. And I think one other key thing that you mentioned that I just wanted to highlight is also when you get that content, not only do you get users when they post that content, but you can also use that content on your site or on your ads too. So that
Yeah.
can also get you higher click through rates.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. So now, once you have the people, coming to your site, any tips on, website design, copy design, to try to increase conversion?
Yeah. Absolutely. So One of the things that I always advise is like, so there's two things, right? Like there's, I see like so many brands driving traffic directly to the website, which is okay, which is fine. Like it works for a few brands, but obviously you're going to see a lot lesser conversion rates. That's because like when a user, a potential customer comes to your website, this person is going to see like so many tens of difference of options on your website. There's like a wholesale option, there's like our story, there's like in your footer there are like so many options, on your header menu there are so many options. So you're not really trying to focus everything on this potential customer buying, that focus isn't really there. So this person can land on your website and really get lost because you've given this person so many different choices. He or she could just click on our story, read the story, and just leave the website because you've given them that choice. Whereas if you have a dedicated landing page, preferably a one page lander, where you probably answer everything a customer would have in their head, a potential objections on one lander, and also let that customer make purchase on the same lander. That's going to have really good conversion rate in contrast to your website, primarily because when someone comes to your landing page, you give them just two choices: they leave your lander or they just make the purchase. There's not really any other things to do. So that's why like landers are important. And one more reason is because it's just a one page lander. It's going to be extremely fast, and people, especially coming from a place like Instagram and Facebook, they don't really have so much of patience. They the people who have been watching like 15 seconds, 1 minute reels, and they don't really have patience of 7 8 seconds until your website loads, because it's got like so many pages and so many JavaScript codes and then whatnot, right? So uh really recommend using a landing page if you're driving paid traffic. um, and then two, if you're looking, I mean, like I remember like when I was trying to build a landing page, I was really trying to find like a product that would like give me what I was looking for and wasn't really that complex. But it was so hard. Like I remember jumping through Shogun and like so many different tools, and in the end, I ended up finding something called as Repro. They also have a Slack community, which I think is like brilliant. Like otherwise, you have to write these people an email, and like they also have an in-app support, which I think is like brilliant. Like that's like they've had like one of the best supports I've had, hands down, the Replo team. And I think like they also had a good funding raise recently, so probably they'll get a lot more support reps as well. But brilliant team, brilliant tool. And if you're someone who's kind of been familiar with a tool such as Figma, you're really going to love Replo. And they're going to also have some direct integrations with Figma. So it's very similar to how Figma looks when it comes, but it's just a landing page tool and not a design tool.
Makes sense. I really liked your point here where people, when they're browsing on Instagram or something like that, you're interrupting their browsing flow, right? So they don't have much patience. So really designing that page so they can make the landing page, they can make that purchase there quickly, and then also be optimizing for speed of load, right? Because any second you're wasting for loading that page, that's, they might lose patience and go back to whatever they're doing. Instagram, they didn't organically just come to their site, they're already browsing, so they have limited.
Exactly. And two more things I think like I would like to add there is one, if I see an ad, which like if I'm a parent, and if an ad speaks to a parent, obviously I'm going to relate. But when I click the ad and if I end up landing on a website which speaks to everyone and not just the parent, they're going to lose me there probably. Or let's say they speak to the parent, they speak to me on the ad, but when I land on the landing page, I see a whole different product than what was shown on the ad. I'm not really going to like it, because I probably clicked that ad because I liked what I saw. But when I land on the landing page, I see a really different product. So highly recommend this, because I see this all the time. Like I go like, why do brands do this? And I think like one other thing that goes without saying is like not having reviews on the landing page, or wherever a user is landing on after clicking the ad. It really boggles my mind when I see a brand not even having the review widget, let alone having reviews. And I go like, hey, like, there's like so many data that says like more than 70 to 80% of the customers make purchase based on what other customers have to say about the product. And if you don't really have even a single customer review, like, I wonder like how your conversion rate is. So yeah, I think like that's one more thing I would want to add. Yeah.
Makes sense. So reviews, obviously, you want to have that social proof when people make those decisions, and then B, also making sure the landing page matches the ad, right? So if that is for segment one, but the landing page is for segment three, and obviously it's not a great experience there.
Yeah, and one last thing, if you're building a landing page, I think like you have to remember is like, if someone has really clicked the ad and has come to your landing page, it's highly likely that they would bounce just for two reasons, at least the majority of them. So one is going to be the price point, and one more is going to be the trust, right? So price point, obviously, you'll have to play around and see what price would be the best to serve your potential customers. But the second, trust, I think, is you've gotta answer all of the potential objections your potential customers would have when they're trying to scroll your landing page, right? Like, uh, it's like when I land on the landing page, I probably have like 4 or 5 questions about the product. So as I keep scrolling the landing page, it should answer all of the objections that I have in my head. So that's how you want to design that page. And also make sure you also keep building the trust as this user keeps scrolling the landing page. You have some features on New York Times and things like that, you put it there, you put those reviews, and you basically add all of the things that can add trust and also potentially answer your potential customers' objections. So after that, it's just a matter of time until they make that purchase.
Makes sense, right? People are gonna have the doubt, and if you don't mention those objections, they're still gonna have them. They're not gonna magically disappear because you don't talk about them, right? So
Exactly.
adding the trust and then just directly addressing the objections is really key there. So
Absolutely.
cool. So I think one thing is, from my understanding, you guys were also on Shark Tank. So maybe you can talk a little more about how that experience was, and then also if you guys saw any lift on any key metrics after you were on that show.
Yeah, so it was my founder, Maxwell Cohen, who was on the Shark Tank. So he was on the Shark Tank about 7 years ago. That is right after college. He went on Shark Tank, and it didn't really end well in the Shark Tank because he was just very young and he wasn't really sure about what he was. I wouldn't say wasn't really sure about what he was doing, but he was young, and he was enthusiastic. He was passionate about the product. He wanted to raise some funds and scale the brand, but Sharks thought like it wasn't going to work. But he did really believe there was a market for the product. And the shark did mention that you should probably go after only institutions, and not retail and not DTC and not Amazon, but just wholesale and institutions. But he did take the advice of going into institutions, but also believed that he could sell it direct to consumer as well. And he was right about that, right? So it's been 7 years, but for me it's been like almost a year since I joined. I think like about 10, 11 months. So yeah, that was about the Shark Tank experience. And he did mention that he definitely had a lift when the Shark Tank aired. In fact, they do keep airing the episode once in a while. So every time that happens, we see some lift as well. So during Shark Tank, the brand was called as a fresh shit, but it was a little confusing for the customers, so we rebranded it to Peel Away.
I like the new branding, and yeah, I see these reruns all the time on certain channels for Shark Tank. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
that's not intuitive. You also get some traffic for that. Um, and then one other thing is I think you also had your own you were a podcast host in the e-commerce space before. How was that experience? Any favorite episodes or key learnings from those?
Yeah, I think like that has to probably be like my most favorite thing that I've ever done in my life. That just the best thing I've ever done. I got to connect with like so many amazing successful founders, got to learn from them, and like it was really mind boggling about the fact that like people have built this multi-million dollar companies, and they were just, I went like, oh, like you've built such big companies and you're okay with just talking to me. So it kind of like mind boggled me. But it's crazy what happens when you're willing to put in the work and then just reach out, because like I think like most people don't even try because they already assume that they're going to say no. But what I realized was like that's not really the case. If you really if you're really genuine, authentic, and you genuinely want to just learn and hear what this guest has to say and then share it with other people, I think like they're really like way more open to it than otherwise. So when it comes to the podcast, I think like I'm connected with like some amazing founders. I remember some of my, I mean, obviously like I had like so much learned from all the guests. A few guests I remember was like one was Greg from CrossNet, and then Ronak and Ashwin from Obvi, probably my most favorite brand. Uh, and then there's one Michael Brand from HVMN. So yeah, I would say like one lesson that has stuck with me from the podcast is, from the learnings, I would say like one thing, if I had to share one thing, that would be something that was shared by Michael Brandon. It's something that's always been with me ever since I've interviewed him. So that is, he talks about brand building as a surface of a tennis ball. So if you're trying to build a brand, you got to make sure the surface of your tennis ball is entirely covered. So if you have figured out how to acquire new customers, so that covers a small surface of your tennis ball. If you have built a good website that speaks to your customers, that covers one more area, small area of the tennis ball. If the copy of your website is friendly, but then the way your customer support rep speaks to your customers is a bit aggressive, there's going to be a huge disconnect. So if that matches the tone of the copy of your website, there's going to be a connection. So that covers one more surface. So when you do all of those things, that's when the entire surface of your tennis ball is covered, and that's when a brand is built. So I thought like that was really interesting. So that's one thing that has always stuck with me.
Makes sense. That's a really good analogy and a great point about having and making sure the tone of the customer support rep, right, matches your brand or your ads, right. So it's kind of having that full journey and making sure that all reflects your brand, not just kind of the colors and the logo.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. And I think also, yeah, just as you pointed out, really appreciate all the guests who come on this show. Really enjoy those learnings.
Yeah.
And then a couple wrap up questions here. Any kind of e-commerce trends you're super excited about, or yeah.
Yeah, I think like it it would be crazy not to mention AI. I think like it's going to completely revolutionize the e-commerce and DTC space. So I just saw this one video that was put out by Google yesterday on LinkedIn, and it was just mind boggling of what it showed us, and what the Google AdWords AI is going to be capable of. You're not really going to need a lot of graphic designers and all of those things. The AI is going to not only uh, optimize for conversions based on the search copy and all of that, but also the images, the videos, and all of those things you put out. And it's just mind boggling of what it was capable of. So I think like that is something that I'm really looking forward to. But apart from that, I also see like so many brands. I mean, we've not really implemented this yet, but I see like some brands that are really huge right now implementing AI for customer support and all of that. And recently I was just seeing one post on LinkedIn where there was this one AI trying to reply to one customer's uh, inquiry on the website. So it was crazy. Like I was just saying it, and I was like, oh my god! Like I would have never assumed that it was a bot because it was so human, and then it was amazing. Yeah. Makes the customer basically feel special, and also answers their inquiries like precisely. So that is one. When it comes to AI, we also use a tool called, like I used to use a tool called as video.ai. So basically you feed like a long form content, and then it basically gives you like short size content, like so that is one more something that I like when it comes to AI. And I think like the last tool I would mention when it comes to AI is like perplexity AI. So it's more like chat gpt, but in this case it's completely free as well. In this case, what it does is it obviously is built on chat gpt, open source AI. uh, but in this case it also tells you the source of where it found these information from. So you can literally click those sources and go and read the entire article if you want to like dig really deep. Obviously it can give you like multiple sources as well. So I think that's a tool that, yeah, that's something that I keep using again and again. But overall, AI and the e-commerce space, I think, is going to be like really fun and something I look forward to.
Makes sense. Definitely going to transform industries like marketing and advertising. And I think a lot of these players like Google and Facebook will do the legwork for you. So you just kind of upload your catalog and they'll handle it. And then also things like customer support.
Yeah.
Um, any kind of communities, conferences, events, podcasts, things like that you found helpful.
Yeah, so when it comes to communities, I would say limited supply community on Slack for all things DTC, I think is like amazing. It's run by Nick Sharma. I'm pretty sure, like, if you're in the DTC and e-commerce space, you probably know who Nick Sharma is. Limited Supplies podcast by Nick Sharma and Moise Ali, I think, is like brilliant as well. Nick Sharma's DTC newsletter, and then there's a podcast called as Chew on This, and they have their own newsletter as well. It's basically run by Ronak Shah and Ashwin Melwani, both of whom I had gotten on my podcast. Brilliant people, brilliant co-founders. They have an amazing team, amazing learnings. So would highly recommend these resources. And I think like one last newsletter I would recommend is Cody Plofker's newsletter. He's the CMO of Jones Road Beauty and all usually shares a lot of thing on all things on media buying and Facebook ads.
Makes sense. I think I've subscribed to almost all of those. They're really
Yeah.
good resources. And then last question. This is more of a fun one. Any kind of brand you bought from recently or a really good shopping experience you've had?
Uh, yeah. So, and obviously, like, although like I work for a US brand, obviously I don't really buy a lot from US. But when it comes to Indian brands, I bought coffee from this one brand called as Colorado. So, uh, they had a very nice packaging, nice little cart. The product arrived in like 2 3 days. I kept getting like like SMS text on where my product is, with my tracking link. So all of those things, like small things, I thought was like really nice. So shout out to Colorado Shopee coffee brand.
Is it based in
But
Colorado or?
not really. It's based out in India.
Okay, I was a little confused because you said yeah, it makes more sense. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So apart from that, if you were to ask me my favorite brand, altogether, it's a brand that I haven't really purchased from, but I would definitely want to mention Obvi. I think like they've done like so many things by the textbook. Really well built by three co-founders, Ronak Shah, Ashwin Melwani, and Ankit. They have a Facebook community with over 50,000 people. This community just keeps growing, and the community managers are basically the people, basically the customers that are within the community. They've made them admins. They send out them a few products to them, and these people within the community keep posting as well, because it's a supplement brand that has like collagen in it. So they keep posting the content as well, the transformation, and like this is how I've used to look and all of that. And obviously these people like take some of this content and use it for marketing purposes with their consent. So which I think is like brilliant. And overall I think is like they've built really pretty good brand, and it's something that I have always been, there's just so many things to learn from that brand and the co-founders.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sun Mall Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe.